And there's another technique that you can use in business.
Yeah.
And that's thinking about scenarios. I mean, people find it very, very difficult sometimes to think about business planning and how you.
I'm so bad at that. I'm going to ask you I'm going to ask you a lot of questions here, David.
I'll give you my tip for how to deal with it. It's astonishingly simple.
Right.
You imagine yourself at some point in the future. So let's say 5 years, or in other cases, the appropriate timescale might be 10.
Yeah.
Right? But it doesn't matter. Some point in the future, and then you write yourself a story about what's happening and how you got there.
Okay. Write yourself a story.
Yeah. Now, the reason for writing a story is that human beings, again, if you think about this in evolutionary terms, we bond together by having stories. You know, we tell our kids stories. Everybody responds to stories.
Yeah.
In a sense, this podcast is it's partly stories, right?
Yeah.
That's what people like. They don't like dry mathematical equations or the teacher telling them the 3 rules that they need to follow, right? Mm-hmm. If you get told it in a story, you can relate to it. So just the same with business planning. Just think about yourself in, as I say, maybe 5 years' time, maybe 10 if you can do it. How did you get there? And what were the mistakes that you might have made, and how did you correct them? And that's enough to be able to get through the fog. Otherwise, all you're doing is you're taking the current situation and extrapolating it. The future isn't going to be like that, but you can imagine a different future, particularly if you've been an eclectic reader and read quite a bit of science fiction and other stuff. Then it's a lot easier to be able to think about these things.
How would you, so you literally get a piece of paper, like what do you specifically do, and then what's next?
But here's the thing.
Sure.
You can't extrapolate.
Yeah.
That's a real mistake.
Okay.
You can't take
Yeah.
what's going on at the moment and just then project it forward, because everything is going to change. I mean, we're sitting here in this room, and I know, people eat, and they always eat, and they do these things, but the kit that you've got for recording this podcast is not the same kit that you would have had 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's enabling you to do quite different things that you didn't imagine were possible. Now, if you'd simply extrapolated from the kit that you've been using 3 years ago and the audiences that you were reaching and how the technology was and the social media, you wouldn't be doing what you're doing. So you've got to project ahead. You've got to think, what is it going to be like? And then come back. It's much easier doing it that way than it is. Now, the spreadsheets have their place. You know, you've got to, in business, you've got to have numbers. And, it's all very well having fantasies about how you're going to make money. But, in the end, it's got to come down to real numbers. But without the story, without the narrative, the numbers mean nothing.
And would you literally write this on a piece of paper?
Yeah.
And then, so is there a specific example where you've got a panoply of different wonderful businesses?
Oh, yeah, I've got a great example.
Yeah.
It's Abcam, which I co-founded with Jonathan Milner, who was then a research scientist at Cambridge. We met by accident, and I cover it in my book about how we sat down actually at a dinner table not dissimilar to this.
Yeah. And
I had a chat with him. One of my rules is always be curious about other people, find out a bit about them.
Sure.
And anyway, I'll come back to that perhaps as we go on through this recording. But what happened?
Sorry, just for context, what was Abcam? What was the?
Okay, how do we want to do? Sorry, I assume you can cut and splice.
Yeah. But also, it's very free flowing. So don't be worried about being an order. It just jumps around. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, look. Let's before we get on to the scenarios, let me tell you a little bit about Abcam, which is an antibody company.
Yep.
It still does, but in a different way. It sells antibodies on the web. Now, you've got to go back to the late 1990s when everybody was getting very interested in what the web might be able to do. And so I was sitting with Jonathan, and in my company, which was a company called Analysis, a telecoms consultancy company, I got very excited about all the web stuff. And we've been developing a lot of systems that underpinned our consultancy company. So we had a team of 6 or 8 software engineers in a consultancy company, just simply providing the back office systems. You couldn't buy these things off the shelf.
Wow.
So I had all this expertise. If I'd understood just what Salesforce would become, or some of these other companies, I would have done those things. But I was fortunate enough to meet Jonathan. Jonathan had this expertise in antibodies. He was doing research, and his problem was very straightforward, that if you're a researcher and you buy an antibody and you use it for identifying a protein in the reaction that you're trying to work out what's actually happening, then if it goes wrong, you waste weeks of work. And so what he wanted was reliable antibodies, reliable in the sense that if I use them in this context, then I know how they will work. So if I use them in this context, I know how they will work.
Yep.
And the thing was that one of his co-workers had an uncle who had a farm in Wales, and he thought of having a goat farm where you could raise these antibodies. I said, no fixed costs, right? This is how we do it. And I literally did the business model in my head at that dinner. And then that was, I think it was on a Monday or a Tuesday. And basically the following Saturday, Jonathan was in my office and we were starting the company.
Right.
Now, the company was sold to Danaher last year for $6 billion.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a success. It's quite a big company. And it was a success because we were first in the market and we were first to use web stuff. I remember other companies coming along to see if they wanted to buy us and being absolutely baffled by the idea that this web company would actually have some value. They didn't. It's strange to think about it these days.
Sure.
But they really didn't get it. They didn't understand what was going on. But as part of this thing, when you've got a new company and you're breaking completely new ground, and as I say, it's difficult for your listeners to understand this was completely new ground. When you're breaking this new ground, you need to think ahead and not extrapolate. So one of the things that I did is a little example.
Sure.
I took the current growth rate of Abcam and thought about how that might evolve into the future. So I was thinking 5-10 years into the future, and I did a little spreadsheet, these lovely evil spreadsheets. And one of the things was we were going to be constrained on the size of fridges that we had, because antibodies need to be kept at minus 80 degrees centigrade. And we were going to find that we just didn't have the fridge capacity to be able to deal with things.
Sure.
Now, that wasn't going to happen for 3 to 4 years. So we were in time to start a program of developing robot fridges, which would enable us to collapse down the number of fridges and the quantity that we needed, because we could then improve the processes. So by the time we were starting to get close to this problem of needing a lot of capacity, we already had the robot fridges in place.
Yep.
And just to give you some idea about what the impact of that was, we went down from fulfilling an order in 26 minutes to fulfilling an order in about 8 seconds. And completely automated. Okay, so that's the kind of thing that you do when you think ahead. But the more important one, the more interesting example, is getting Jonathan to write a story about what Abcam was going to be in 10 years' time.
Okay.
And I suggested he did it as an interview. So he did it as if he was being interviewed by somebody from the Financial Times in 10 years' time.
Wow.
About how Abcam had got to where it was. And he explained exactly how Abcam had got to where it was. And together with the spreadsheet that I'd done and Jonathan's interview, we ended up in 10 years within about 5% of the revenue that we were projecting 10 years previously.